And right below that, when people click on this online and see it, almost all of what's below that 3 bullet points is redacted. So I guess we don't know what those sources are.
We don't know what that is, but what jumps out at me is that this does appear to be in direct conflict with what then FBI Director James Comey testified to before the Senate Intelligence Committee, that several months later, with the incoming president, when he briefed him at Trump Tower, he briefed him that these allegations were largely unverified and salacious. So this seems to be a far cry, or there's a lot of daylight between what Comey testified to and what's being claimed in the Democrats' memo. I'm now halfway through at page 5, and I want to draw your attention rather to a key section right here, and it goes to one of the central findings of the Republican memo, that the dossier's funding, that it was funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign, that this was never directly shared with the National Security Court that granted the surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. And their argument is that the court really should have known the specifics of this research document and that there was really an agenda behind it. And what the Democrats write on this front is that the information that the dossier was a political document was shared by the FISA court, but that issues surrounding the specific identities of the individuals and groups involved were not shared with the court. They were shielded, and to use my own language, this was in keeping with the FBI's standard practice of trying to protect sources and methods. You and folks at home can decide whether that was a legitimate use of that shielding tactic in this particular case. So rather than tell the court it was the DNC and the Clinton campaign, they chose to use language such as person 1 was hired by law firm 1, then used a research firm, 2, in order to put this information together. So they describe it as a political document, but they do not get to the specifics of the DNC and the Clinton campaign funding it. Now, one of the critical issues in the Republican staff memo is that Christopher Steele, his contact was terminated with the FBI after they concluded that he had lied about his contacts with the media. He was directed by Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm, to brief a half-dozen American media outlets about the findings of the dossier in an effort to sort of seed that narrative in media reporting. And what the Democrats' version says right here is that once the FBI cut off contact with Christopher Steele, the British spy, this was shared with the court, and they also shared with the court in the January 2018 renewal. So there were multiple renewals of the surveillance warrant for Carter Page. That one of the reasons Steele had made disclosures is that he was extremely frustrated with Director James Comey's decision to reopen the Clinton email case just 10 days before the 2016 election. So they talked about Steele's frustration with Comey, though I've yet to see a reference here to Steele's own statements that he had this sort of personal animus and wanted to do whatever it took to stop candidate Trump. Final point before I send it back to you. There's been widespread reporting that the FBI paid Christopher Steele for this work on the dossier, but the Democrats' memo states very clearly that the Justice Department never paid Steele for the dossier work. It was correct that the FBI had authorized payment for the work, but in effect the check was never written and sent and cashed by Steele. So they authorized payment, but ultimately, this is a quote, ultimately never received payment from the FBI for any dossier-related information. So in summary here, they make the argument that the FBI and Justice Department really did everything they needed to do when they told the FISA court it was a political document, the Trump dossier. They didn't feel, because the FBI has standards in terms of shielding sources and methods, they didn't need to get into the specifics of it was the DNC and the Clinton campaign that paid for it. Number two, they say that they shared with the court that he had been terminated and that he was personally angry with Director Comey for reopening the email case just a few days before the election, because this was very damaging to her prospects. And number three, they make the case that Steele was never paid by the FBI for his work.
Okay.
So I'll let you know as I get more.
Exactly. All important points.
Thank you.
Catherine, thank you.
Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida has introduced a bill in Congress that would increase oversight of the FISA courts, the courts that allow the government to spy on you, by making judges subject to presidential appointment and Senate confirmation, bringing a little democracy and transparency to the process. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California may find that bill familiar. To his credit, by the way, he introduced the exact same bill verbatim, word for word, 5 years ago. But apparently this time he's not eager to back his own law. Why is that? Did his principles change, or just his short-term political calculations? We've invited Congressman Matt Gaetz to join us, as well as former Hillary Clinton campaign advisor Richard Goodstein. Welcome to you both. To you, Congressman, first. This is word for word the same bill, and tell me if I'm wrong, and the person who wrote the bill is refusing to support it this time, or seems like he won't. Why is that?
It seems odd, Tucker, that when Barack Obama was president, Democrats wanted to give the president more power to work with the Senate to get members of the FISA court that aren't part of the D.C. swamp, but that come from all over America and have the opportunity to represent the values that Americans hold dear regarding their liberties. I didn't change one comma in Adam Schiff's bill. I refiled it because I think that Republicans and Democrats are going to be in power in the future, and if there are bipartisan ideas that would have more transparency and more oversight and protect our civil liberties, I think we ought to work together rather than working separately.
So did he send you a thankful text when you did that?
You know, I asked for him to co-sponsor it, and I just haven't heard back yet, Tucker. It's a strange coincidence.
Richard, would you mind calling him? I mean,
I'll try.
And by the way, I just want to be totally clear. Good for Adam Schiff, whom I rarely compliment, for introducing this bill in the first place 5 years ago. It seems like a common sense reform of the kind we need. Why wouldn't he support it now?
Can I just remind you why he introduced the bill? This was in light of the Edward Snowden leaks, right? There were, thanks to WikiLeaks, who were vilified by Republicans back then, and Donald Trump says, I love WikiLeaks on the campaign trail, okay? So my point is, things get twisted in odd ways. You'll have to ask Adam Schiff what his problem is.
Hold on, no. He wasn't just vilified by Republicans, but also by Democrats.
Absolutely.
Just to be fair. And I don't know why Republicans didn't support it then. They should support it, and so should everyone. But honestly, how could Adam Schiff, who poses as a man of principle, fail to support his own bill? That doesn't make sense, does it?
Again, I think the rules of the Senate have actually changed about confirming judges. So I think you'd have to ask him. I'm not here as his defender.
You're a little disappointed, though. You'd have to be, right?
I think, back then he had Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley and other liberal Democrats who were supporting the principle in the interest of protecting individual freedoms. So, yeah, I think there's something behind it.
8 of them still cared about that.
Of course. Why does it have to be partisan?
None do now. Well, I totally agree. So, but all of this gets to the core question in these dueling memos, Republican and Democrat, Nunes and Schiff, gets to the question of the FISA warrant. What did the DOJ say in order to spy on Carter Page? Why can't we see that? Why can't we decide for ourselves?
We should, Tucker, and I'm glad that the White House has joined the call to see more of what was in this FISA application, and I think that we'll be able to see things that Adam Schiff wrote that are verifiably untrue. And I think that will bolster the claims that we're making on the Republican side that there needs to be reform and there needs to be accountability for people at the FBI who withheld the political origins of this dossier from the court. That's the real problem here. There's no dispute that cash at the DNC was convertible into a government-sponsored warrant to spy on American citizens. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that should concern you because it could happen to any of us. That's why we need reform. And frankly, it'd be nice if we didn't all, go to our separate corners politically. If we found some ideas that Republicans or Democrats had offered that would provide the transparency and oversight to give the American people confidence.
Well, I agree, and I hope, Richard, and who knows, but I really sincerely hope if the roles were reversed and the RNC had paid for a document that some Republican administration had used to spy on a rival political campaign, that I would be principled enough to say, you know what, that is an abuse of power, because it is. Why? And I'm sure you agree as a civil libertarian. You just said that you were. We should be worried about that. So why shouldn't we see the FISA application?
I am a civil libertarian, but I'm more so an American citizen who cares for kind of the integrity of the United States. And I think what the FBI was concerned with, for good reason, I believe, is that Carter Page was, as they concluded, a foreign agent. And maybe they didn't even know what the Trump people knew. I will say this. The Russians approached one campaign and one campaign only, the Trump campaign, not the Clinton campaign.
I know he's in the pocket of Putin. We've heard this before.
No, but I'm saying...
But it's really simple. Why can't we just see the FISA application? It's really, this is our government. They spied on an American citizen. Perhaps they had good reason. Perhaps they didn't. Why can't we know?
Well, you have to ask the FISA court.
But why wouldn't you support that? Why don't Democrats say, let's end this nonsense and find out why they did this?
So it's a question of kind of what the relevant rules are, because the FISA is secret by design. But again, the fact of the the matter is, what Schiff said and is unrebutted is that the dossier had relatively little role in getting that warrant.
Let's find out.
And it was in a footnote. There was a reference.
But how do we know? Why don't look? Is there any support in the Congress for ending? If the Russians want to control our political process, they're doing it now by paralyzing everything with this stupid debate, which we could end instantly by making this stuff public. Is there support for doing that in your Congress?
I believe that there's support on the Republican side to release the entire FISA application as long as we're able to redact sources and methods where I think we should be able to find agreement. I don't think the Democrats will want to do that because the dossier was the lead piece of evidence. It's what every lawyer you know, Tucker, starts with their best evidence.
And
we should.
And
I agree with the congressman. Let's say, I agree with the congressman that this should be put out. But again, there's no disputing that the whole investigation preceded the dossier being concluded. Papadopoulos was the tip of that spear.
We don't know that. And let's just find out, and then we'll do a show on it after that. Maybe we could not do any Russia until the Congress releases this and lets the people decide what they think. And we can put this to bed.
Good luck.
God bless
I'd be for
you.
it.
Both. Thank you very much.
Sure.